I think that's one lesson that we really learned is no matter what you do, you have to have one or two properties that you're, have LOIs at, you're negotiating, that you have that 17 days or 20 days or whatever that time period that you're negotiating in to get your due diligence. And if you have to be able to, if you have to time to pivot, you pivot.
Welcome to Deal Flow with me, Michael Poulio, the go-to destination for private equity and real estate professionals, including institutional investors, sponsors, and market experts. Each week, I talk with industry insiders on everything real estate, capital, and PropTech. Today, we have Tiffany Mittal. She is a businesswoman with over 13 years experience in the multifamily real estate space, excelling as an owner-operator and PropTech executive. She founded Utility Ranger, a tenant utility billing software company, which has led to a partnership with the 10X Incubator and the launch of her new PropTech startup in 2022. She resides in Florida with her husband and 4 children. Tiffany, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, I'm excited. Well, I know I gave you a little bit of an intro there, but if you wouldn't mind for the listeners, just give us a little bit more about your background, kind of where it all started, and what you're focused on today.
I've been in multifamily for actually I think it's closer to 15 years now. I started kind of fell into the business with my husband, who's been in multifamily his whole life, and when I was going to grad school, started helping him with his apartments. And noticed there was lots of problems that needed to be solved. And kind of that's how I ventured from the multifamily space and the owner-operator space into the PropTech space more recently. So I love multifamily. I think that there's a lot of opportunities for improvement, especially when it comes to technology-related services. And I don't think I would have it any other way. And so now we moved our whole family from California and San Diego to Florida recently. And we've been doing a bunch of 1031 exchanges, moving our assets out of California into Fort Lauderdale, where it's quite a bit more of a landlord-friendly state. So we are enjoying the process. I'm still very much in operations of the multifamily space, as well as leading our PropTech company, Utility Ranger.
Awesome. Well, a lot of topics there to hit on. So before we get into, I think, Utility Ranger and what you're focused on today, maybe let's spend a little bit of time, almost 15 years in the multifamily space. That brings us all the way back to 2010. Oh boy, has the market changed since then. Maybe could you tell us a little bit about that journey from 2010, your early days in the industry, to where you are today? I think where you are today is probably a little bit intimidating, perhaps for some. So maybe just bring us back to where you guys started, and how you and your business has evolved as an owner operator, and then we can touch a little bit about the utility company.
Well, I think it's definitely changed quite a bit, especially as an owner-operator in Southern California. I think Southern California has changed quite a bit in the entire industry of multifamily, real estate, and kind of the challenging aspects of being a landlord in California, which was one of the many drivers that kind of drove us out to Florida. But, multifamily in 2010, and really just all of real estate in 2010, was kind of the bottom of the market. We kind of hit the crash of 2008 and really things had bottomed out, but there was still a lot of opportunity. And so we were really well positioned to take advantage of a lot of that opportunity. Like I mentioned before, my husband grew up in multifamily. Him and his family had about 3,000 units, or have about 3,000 units in California. And we were really trying to grow our own individual portfolio in Southern California as well at the time. And so because a lot of our relationships that we had and really kind of inherited because of the family dynamics of the family business my husband came from, we were able to kind of take advantage of, good loan deals and really good opportunities that when we saw properties that were, discounted per se, we could take advantage and buy some. So we did quite a bit of buying of properties in 2011, 2012, We bought quite a few multifamily deals in San Diego and continued to try to buy some assets, year over year. More recently, we've been buying assets in Florida. The opportunities have really shifted. San Diego and California were really great markets, for multifamily for many years, really driving a lot of the appreciation in the market. But it's really challenging now, especially with interest rates. Interest rates back then were, much more favorable than they are now. And, I think the dynamics and the opportunity has really shifted. Now we see a lot more opportunity in Florida with growing demand and appreciation, where our properties in California seem to be depreciating a bit. There's appreciation overall, but as far as, the markets and the submarkets that we were in, they've really flattened out over the years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, a lot of challenges to being a landlord in some of these tenant-friendly areas, and certainly California is, I guess, the poster child for that. It's a similar story of people, they build their portfolios in California, and then they, for every one unit you have in California, you could buy 10 units somewhere else potentially. So taking advantage of the 1031 exchange laws, sounds like that's something you guys are doing.
Oh, yeah.
What has been your experience executing on, 1031 exchanges? From my experience and when I talk to people, it can be a little bit stressful executing within the timelines and just finding the sort of like a little bit of musical chairs. So maybe you can speak to that a little bit about your experience migrating your assets or migrating your equity from one area to another.
Even though I've been in this business for quite a long time, we've never really been in the business of selling properties. It was more just acquiring properties. And so this is really my first experience dealing with the 1031 exchange process. My husband had been dealing with this, over time throughout the years in his life in real estate growing up. But I'd never really experienced the pressures of the 1031 exchanges. It's definitely daunting. You really don't want to sell your down leg until you have your up leg, pretty secured. And we actually got really, really fortunate. I think there's a lot of negatives that happened with the COVID debacles across all the states. But there was some silver linings that happened for us in California, meaning around the same time that we moved out from San Diego was 2022, and it was in 2023 they had a ton of rain, really causing a lot of issues within Southern California. And so that was the year that we started buying properties, and by mere chance that year they had extended the 1031 deadlines, and they said, there's so many issues going on in the state, we're going to actually extend the deadline. So it doesn't really matter when you sell it. Now you just have to close it by, I don't remember the date, it was either September or October 15th. And so that really gave us the opportunity and became a catalyst to sell a bunch of kind of single family homes that my husband had purchased in college, and sold about 5 or 6 single family homes that we had as college area rentals, and bulk those together, which normally it's really challenging to sell multiple properties and bulk the funds together and do the 1031 exchange. But we were able to buy or sell 5 houses, and exchange into a 30-unit property in Fort Lauderdale, or actually specifically Pompano Beach. And it's kind of crazy how it worked out. And then the same kind of thing happened again in I don't know if it happened this year in 2024, but there was some definitely leeway that happened with the 1031 exchanges that allowed us to have a little bit more time than you typically would have. So that pressure was alleviated. But overall, it was still, the kind of, understanding that we're not going to sell the down leg until we have the up leg, at least we're in an LOI, or at least we're in some kind of scenario. But we've actually had a few chances where we, bought a property or had it under contract, and just kind of intuition kicks in saying, let's get a backup property just in case. You get so far down the due diligence timeline and realize, oh my gosh, this property is not going to work, or one thing came up where we found this amazing property, but it was a 100-year-old property, and it was on the water, and it was 30 units, and had just been completely gutted and redone, and it just seemed like such an amazing opportunity. But when we really got into the due diligence, you realize, wait, this building, it was just restabilized, but only 1/4 of it was restabilized. And, 3/4 of it still need to be restabilized. And we're not in the business, and there's many people who are, but we're not in the business of doing massive, not renovations, but kind of restabilizations, massive projects that require architects and construction. And, we're much more like, let's rehab the units. So that became kind of too big to handle for us. And so we had to pivot quickly, and thank God we had a backup property. And so I think that's one lesson that we really learned is no matter what you do, you have to have 1 or 2 properties that you're, have LOIs at, you're negotiating, that you have that 17 days or 20 days or whatever that time period that you're negotiating in to get your due diligence. And if you have time to pivot, you pivot quickly. We're actually under contract right now on 30 units in Coral Springs, Florida, which is kind of west Fort Lauderdale. And we pivoted to that at the very last minute because another property, they said it was concrete, and you get down into it and you realize, 75% of it was wood. And that's a big difference from California to Florida. You don't buy anything that's wood in Florida. So we had to pivot pretty quickly once we got through the inspection process. So there's a lot of lessons to be learned. I'm still learning them every day. And but your kind of strategy changes a little bit when you pivot to a new market.
Yeah. Yeah. No, there's a lot of things in there with the 1031. I mean, you could do the standard 1031, or sometimes people will do the reverse 1031 if they have the cash available, secure that new property first, and then worry about the sale of the old property. Takes a little bit leverage out of the seller or the buyer on the other property. They know that they sort of have you, and you have to sell. So if you could figure out a way to do the reverse exchange, that's always helpful. But obviously, most of the time, you need the cash from the other property to do it. And then, Florida and wood, especially in these last couple of years, the insurance market alone probably would make that deal prohibitive if they had initially told you concrete. Just being able to get insurance on a property like that probably would have been either really, really expensive or impossible, basically. Yeah. So, a lot of good stuff in there. A lot of differences between California and Florida. And right now, recording this early January, there is a pretty decent sized wildfire going on that is in LA. Not necessarily as far where you guys are, but a lot of natural disaster risk kind of all over the place these days. That you
and people who can't get insurance. I mean, I thought the insurance market was crazy when we moved to Florida. We were paying about $600 a door per year in California. And when you pivot here and you realize it's, $2,000, $2,500
great deal.
a door, it's crazy. And but now you hear that the insurance is that high in California. So I don't know if we,
right.
You can't really escape the insurance issue. I think it's going to continue to be a problem, overall.
Yeah, it's not really the grass is kind of not good everywhere. It's not a grass is greener situation. The insurers seem to be sort of, spreading the risk around everywhere. So we're all sort of taking the brunt. So we spent a lot of time there. I'd love to talk a little bit about, so it's about Utility Ranger, and maybe you could tell us a little bit about that business, and what Utility Ranger does, and what was the impetus for starting that. It sounds like you guys were pretty successful in the real estate business already. So what made you guys say, hey, I want to move and also do this very difficult thing of starting a brand new company in the PropTech space?
It's one of those things where you see an issue in your current business and you try to solve it, and then you figure out that it's not so easily solved. And so we just decided to set out to solve it ourselves. And what I mean is, we had such a problem with our water and sewer expense in San Diego. And San Diego is really the bottom of the barrel when it comes to water availability in California. The water rates are astronomical, and tenants were super wasteful. I remember what really triggered it one day is we had a tenant who called us to say that her neighbor left her water on all day. She could hear it running. We said, there's something going on. We sent the manager in there, and turns out that she was leaving her shower on when she went to work because her dog had anxiety. And she wanted the dog to think that she had her shower on and that she was home. Nowadays we would just put the shower on the YouTube channel and make the white noise or something. But I think her dog was smarter than that. I don't know. But we knew we had to do something at that point. And we had heard of this thing called RUBS, which is ratio utility billing, which basically means you're going to change the utility responsibility from landlord paid to tenant paid. This sounded like a great idea. We called every utility billing company available, and they all turned us away. They said, I'm sorry, you're too small. Our properties have to be 100-unit minimums. We have to have 1,000 units in your portfolio minimum. You're just too small. And at the time, we had maybe like 65 units, even though my in-laws and their family business had a few thousand units. We had to kind of be the guinea pigs. Like, let's test this out. And if it works, we'll bring it back to the portfolio. And I would typically dangle that scenario when trying to get anyone to do business with us. But all these companies, they just weren't interested. And so at the time, you said, what are you going to do? And my husband said, you're not really liking the operations, which I didn't like the operations if I had to deal with my husband's tenants' bed bugs and the maintenance crews. It just was not my cup of tea. This is not where I felt like I was going to get my master's degree, worthiness was dealing with my tenants. And I just graduated from school at that point. And so he said, well, why don't you go work for one of these PropTech companies that is doing this and bring it back, and we'll figure out how to do this. They have to take you on as a client by default, I'm sure. And I said, hey, that's a great idea. So I got a job at one of the companies that happened to be located in San Diego. I was like the fourth employee, helped grow them from, 100,000 to 20 million in a very short amount of time, in about 5 years. And really saw firsthand what happened because they did take us on as a client. And I remember the first property we did this on was a 36-unit property in San Diego. That following year, we got about $36,000 of additional utility reimbursement money, which doesn't seem like a lot of money, but it's about $1,000 a unit per year. But it wasn't until we got that property refinanced by, I think it was Fannie Freddie, they valued our property at $1 million more just for that $36,000 of additional NOI. And that's really when the bell rang for us. We're like, whoa, like I didn't realize that, this small value add, it was no money out of pocket. It was just changing the landlord to tenant responsibility of utilities would give us $1 million increase in valuation. What would this look like across our portfolio? What would this look like across our family's portfolio? We were able to cash out refi, $500,000, use that money to buy another property. And that's when we realized this is really a mechanism to grow your portfolio. It's really a forced appreciation method or an NOI hacking method of how can I really help grow the value of my properties with no money out of pocket. So, but the problem is all these service companies that were out there, my sister had a dozen units in LA. She's like, oh, I see what you're doing. Help me do it. I said, I'm sorry, I can't take you on as a client. You're too small, because we had tons of employees and people doing this as a manual system. And so I said, how can I really take this, service model and turn it into a software model and make it so simple I could put it into the hands of the small owners that people aren't going to service. And you look at the apartment, there's 35 million or so apartments across the US. Like half of those are owned by these mom and pop owners who fall into this kind of small subset of owners that no one will service. So we saw kind of pent up demand and kind of an unavailability of these owners to access this type of technology. And they're the ones who need it the most. Like, how can the little guy grow to be as big as the big guy if nobody will help them? So, and that's was us. Like, we were the little guys. Like, how can I then take this and teach others how to do the same thing? And so I felt like I really had this calling. Like, how can I do this? I really understood the market. I really understood the business model. I didn't really understand the technology as much. Actually pivoted again, I got recruited out to work for a technology company that offered this as a service as well as a payments company, but then acquired a utility billing company they needed to have me help them with. And so I really understood the technology side of that after a while and said, okay, it's actually during COVID in 2020, I said, I have to do this. I have this calling. I really want to start this company and serve the little guy the same way, and help them the same way that we were helped on growing our portfolio. So that's how really Utility Ranger was born. And about a year and a half in, I was out of money. Software was half built, and I felt like I couldn't really go ask my husband for a bunch more money to finish my product. So that's when I pitched my company to the Grant Cardone's 10X Incubator, and then they acquired half our company on the spot. They helped us finish our product. We launched it a year later. We raised some money, finished our product, launched it a year later, and now we've been live for about a year and a half. We have an immense partnership with some of the largest utility billing companies in the country, who are basically like, we have all these leads who we can't service either. You take them on. So it's really, there's a huge market for this of underserved multifamily owners who need some kind of way to bill their tenants. I like to think of ourselves as like the TurboTax of utility billing. Like, utility billing is about as sexy as doing your own taxes, which nobody wants to do. But when you start to realize, like, all you're doing is giving your tax guy numbers for him to plug into a software. Like, I could just plug those same numbers into my own software if it was really easy and do it myself. And so that's where you kind of just demystified the whole process of utility billing and made it so simple that anyone can do it, and then leverage this additional equity that they can create, grow their portfolio, and make it really simple.
Okay, so love that overview. I love the idea of comparing the Utility Ranger to TurboTax, right? So I can assume that this is like a self-serve model. And then maybe before we get into like the details of that, just for people who maybe don't know much about, I know you described RUBS a little bit, but like how does, just go a little more detail about what this is and exactly the mechanics of why this would be interesting for a owner operator or anyone who's in the apartment space, or anyone who has utilities that they need to partition out to their tenants. Maybe just go a little more in detail about that, and then we could talk more about how the model works.
Yeah. Well, it's pretty simple, meaning utilities are your third largest expense, when it comes to multifamily operations. And so, but your electric, back in the 70s, there was regulation put in that all new apartments had to be separately metered and directly connected to the electric companies. But they never did that for water. And the reason they didn't do it for water is just because of the way water is distributed. You don't want the water company in your individual apartment units. So they basically just continue to bring water to the street. And that water is really, the responsibility of the landlord at that point. But the landlord's not anybody who's using the water. And so you have just tenants who have super wasteful behaviors. And you always think to yourself, or I think to myself, like, how do you act when you go to a hotel room? Let's say your shirt's a little wrinkly, right? Like, we all put our shirt on the hanger, we put it in the shower, turn it on hot water, we shut the door because I don't want to pull out the iron. And it's just really wasteful, but we do it because it comes with the cost of the hotel room, right? And our tenants really think the same way. If they don't have to pay for their water, they're going to do their dishes with one, the dishwasher with one dish in there. They're going to do their laundry with one shirt in there because it doesn't impact them at all. But if they were to go rent a house or rent any other kind of rental, you would have to sign up with a water company yourself. And so until residents become responsible for their usage by actually getting a bill, the goal is a slight modification of behavior, right? And so some people might put sub-meters on their units, some people, might not, and they use something called RUBS, or ratio utility billing. Either way, both are utility billing. One requires a capital output for sub-meters, and there's a lot of complexities around sub-meters, and most of the utility billing or regulations in the country have more to do with sub-metering. But net, as far as ROI, what you get in return, whether it's sub-metered or whether you're doing it with a RUBS methodology, which is basically a mathematical equation of how many people you have in your unit versus the size of your unit and compared to all the other units and people in those units. Because you can't evenly split it. You have family of 5 in one unit, little grandma next door in another unit. So you need a way to kind of fairly allocate the expense. So, but either way, whether it's you sub-metered or allocation, both of those are going to give you a huge return. And we all know with the properties, apartments are valued with your net operating income divided by your cap rate. So every dollar that you can add to your net operating income, you're basically taking your third largest expense of utilities and turning that into utility reimbursement money. So all of that money is a direct impact to your NOI and causes a huge jump in the valuation of your property. This is something that not only drives the valuation of your property, but also drives accountability of your residents. So let's say you have a leaky toilet or you have a runny faucet. Tenants don't tell you this necessarily because they're not paying the bill. They don't want you in their unit. They don't want you in your unit to see their dog that they're hiding or their extra tenants that they have or their grow house in the closet. I've seen it all, but it is as soon as you start giving them a bill, they're going to start telling you that their toilet's running and their sinks are leaking. So you don't cause this kind of secondary damage. So you have that piece of it. And then you have the overall conservation of that slight modification of behavior. People want to talk about sustainability. True sustainability is the slight modification of your behavior over time that becomes a sustainable part of your business model. Like this is the essence of sustainability. It's because you're having your tenants be more conscious of their use by getting a bill that's fluctuating each month with the property's bill.
Yeah. And so that makes a lot of sense. So, and the way your software or the way that this traditionally works is, to your point, like there is either a square footage calculation or an occupant, calculation. So the idea is you're changing the behavior of the entire building or the entire property because they're ultimately sharing the burden at that ratio billing system, right? It's not their individual unit usage. So if that example that you gave where that one person was running the shower all day long, essentially that is like being distributed, the cost of that's being distributed across the entire building in that ratio method. It's not that person specifically gets penalized. They sort of share the burden with everyone else. But the hope is that, once they start seeing that bill, those behaviors go away, right? And then everyone gets the benefit of that. Is that right?
Correct.
And the different, and when you do the sub metering, then it's specific to their use on their unit. But like you said, there is a capital outlay to that. It's expensive. It's not something that most landlords want to just spend money on something that's not going to, if they could do this other thing that's much easier, much faster, and it's pretty
really
well
the same result, right? And
same result.
And the hard part is let's say you do put in a sub-metering system, there's other issues with it. Not everything, the batteries fail at different points. There's a meter reading equipment piece of it. There's a lot of other complexities that have to do with it. And sometimes you have buildings that can't be sub-metered because they have commingled plumbing and they don't have, or they have some kind of shared water. And so there's some buildings, you don't really have that even as an option unless you replumb the whole building.
Sure. And so now let's talk about a little bit about your, about how you guys do this specifically. So is this if I wanted to be a client of your guys or of your company, or I'm an owner of a smaller property, it sounds like you guys really go after that smaller property owner who wouldn't be qualified to go after, for a bigger company that maybe has 100 units or something like that. So if you have a smaller property, is this something that they go on this website or your software to do this? Like, how does this work versus maybe a more traditional RUBS program?
Yeah. So a more traditional RUBS program would have a service provider. You would typically have like a 1 to 5 year contract. You kind of have this service provider who does everything for you, often collects. There's a lot of issues within that have been a problem in the industry for a number of years, that people who have been doing utility billing, I always get that this is the bane of their existence because it's always so complicated, or they'll have a $10,000 bill and they get reimbursed $2,000. They're like, where'd all my money go? Because all these tenants are kind of getting nickel and dimed with a bunch of fees, and they don't really have control, and it just seems like a black box. And they don't really necessarily always provide the same kind of level of service. And if you know, as a a landlord tenant relationship is a very important thing to keep a long-term tenant. You really have to protect that relationship. And so, there is services out there that work really well for people. But there's a lot more demand now also for bringing things in-house with like this vertical integration strategy. How do I kind of cut the middleman out? So we have clients who have 5,000 units, and we have clients who have a duplex. We don't have any minimums because we're a software. We don't actually do any billing for our clients. We do train them and walk them through the process for the first, 2 to 4 months, however long they need until they feel comfortable doing it. Again, it's a little bit newer of a process for many people, but when they kind of break down the time that they were spent managing their billing company relationship, they actually streamline the process from, maybe hour to a month to like 10 minutes a month. So it really streamlines the process when you control the whole system. So people go to our website, utilityranger.com. We have no long-term contracts. They get a 2-month free trial to try to set it up. And what we do is we work with them to set up their properties. There's a lot of hidden fees built into the service companies that do this. Ours is a $3 per unit per month. That fee gets put onto the tenant's bill. So essentially it becomes free for the landlords. And then we actually give them the ability to increase that fee to $5, $6, up to $10 so they can actually make additional revenue per unit. We actually have one property management company that's doing this at our $3 a month, and they're charging $6 a month and using this as an add-on service to their property management arm. And then they're making, $3 a month for their 5,000 units. And doing this internally and kind of having a bunch of VAs do this for them. And so some people use this as a revenue generation tool, but most of our clients, I would say the average unit size is around 25 to 50 units. And they'll either do it themselves or have their accountant person do it. And it's very simple. They go in, they sign up, we help them set up their properties. And then we meet with them every month for the first, 3 months, 4 months, however long they need, and just walk them through the process. They just enter in their utility bills, click calculate. It gives them a pre-bill, the ability to make any changes to that pre-bill, and then everything gets emailed off to the tenants. And then tenants get their invoice. They can pay directly through their invoice. So they don't have to log into any kind of resident portal again to make payments. I think residents are kind of overwhelmed by the amount of portals that they have to log into. So we try to kind of streamline the process. They make payment directly through the invoice, or that can be directly sent back over to their property management software system to make payment there as well. So we have a bunch of flexibility that people can do.
Are you integrated with Yardi?
We are working on our integration with them right now.
Okay. All right. Yeah. I was going to say, I think you just saved me like $100,000. So I'm excited about, and maybe more than saved me, maybe made me money. So so that's because we definitely, I guess next, if you could tackle the laundry contracts and some of these other service providers that have just been like hosing landlords for decades with their nonsense. I'm excited for the technology that's to come. So
I think it's hard with PropTech though, because there's not a lot of PropTech founders who are also owners of multifamily. And so I come about this as like, hey, I had a problem and I was a little guy and nobody would help me. So how can I really help solve this for myself? Solve this for our portfolio, and then realize there's so many other people out there who could really be helped by, putting a operator's mind into the mix of how to really streamline this process and make this really simple.
Yeah. And I think also we recently vertically integrated and took all of our property and construction management in house. And I think when we were working with a property manager, it's a lot easier and for them as a property manager to just maintain a relationship with one third party, have that person or that services provider provide the service for all their clients versus taking that service inside of their company as another complex, or in this case, not so complex, but maybe, again, a lot of these companies are sort of living 10 years ago and they're like, oh, well, I have my rep at, I won't say any of the company's names, but, I have my rep over here and they take care of it and I don't have to do anything. And yeah, they charge me $12 a unit or whatever, but I don't care because I'm a property manager and I don't pay that money anyway. My owners pay that. So, and it's easy for me to just lay that off to someone else. But as an owner operator, like you said, like $5 a month times X amount of units, that's a college tuition, like all of a sudden
Yeah,
there's a lot of money there. And there's a lot of these, this is not just here. This is not just in utilities. This sort of same thing is happening across, probably 10 or 15 different contracts or service providers that are in the middle, just making a spread, doing almost nothing.
exactly. It's how
Specifically.
many middlemen can I cut out of the equation? And
Mhm.
with technology now and AI, like we're right now incorporating AI into our platform, which I think will be probably the only billing company in the country that has AI kind of pulled into their platform. And it's because there's so much technology out there. Why am I having to have all these middlemen that are actually just complicating the process, right?
Mhm.
Like I don't need my tenants calling some third party company to ask them about their
Mhm.
water bill, because they're probably, for one, not going to be very nice. They're not going to even know what property they're at. They're not going to probably
Mhm.
answer the question correctly. And then who has to deal with the wrath of the result of the collateral damage that they've caused is me as
Mhm.
a landlord. Like if the tenants
Mhm.
have a question, I want them coming to me. And so our platform
Right.
helps the landlord answer those questions most appropriately back to their tenants as if they were a billing company, or as if they were a utility billing expert, because we're having this utility billing expert piece of the AI, so that way they can answer tenant questions directly and feel confident in the answers that they're giving. It's a really interesting tool to really put that empowerment back into the managers, rather than just kind of piecemealing all your services so you don't have to do very much.
Mhm.
Really it's the control and kind of bringing that in that's going to help you excel in that property management world. And I think unless you're embracing that and kind of embracing the vertical integration, you're going to really be left behind, because nobody wants to feel like they're being piecemealed out.
Yeah. And in like the number one thing about property success that we've learned is really about that tenant satisfaction. It's like
Yeah.
how good of a relationship do you have with your tenants? That's going to lead to them referring other people into your business, which is going to lower your customer acquisition cost. And
Mhm.
then just retention, right? Retention is fantastic. If you can maintain really good retention, you can push rents higher. You don't have turnover costs. I mean, it's the whole source of the entire business is your residents and making sure they're satisfied. And if you can't, you know, provide them the services and the customer service if there's an issue quickly, to a satisfactory degree, then you're going to lose those tenants and you're not going to maintain or develop that reputation in the market. So I love that. So moving away from the product for a second, you are a solo founder of this prop tech. I'm sure it's there's a lot of incumbents here, right? You're dealing with like kind of an old school industry.
Mhm.
A lot of people who just want to do things the way they've been doing it. So maybe can you tell us like some of the challenges you've had just building this business? It sounds like, with startups, there's always, you got the software piece and building the product and, keeping it funded, but just like also finding clients, getting people convinced that, hey, this is the way to go. You maybe talk a little bit about the challenges and some of the wins that you guys have had in building this company over the last few years.
I would say our kind of go to market approach is very different than the traditional companies. And it's because nobody's really figured out how to reach this subset of the market. They always use the term fragmented. This lower, mom and pop owners are so fragmented. They don't go to NAA, they don't go to all these associations. And yeah, they don't, right? They listen to podcasts. They follow people like Grant Cardone and Jake and Gino, and they listen to people who are helping and coaching them to grow their portfolios. So I've really approached the marketing side of this and getting the word out there by kind of going to where I know that they are, because this is where I was going. Right. And
Mm-hmm.
so you do have some giants. We've already had somebody try to acquire us, which is one of the largest utility billing companies out there. And, these kinds of moves definitely shake things up a bit. I actually have seen a couple of SaaS companies kind of come to market recently, right after we launched. So I know that we're definitely onto something, and the utility billing companies that we've talked to partner with, they're definitely like, oh my God, I don't know why I didn't think of this ourselves. So I think that the competition is going to continue to increase. But I
Mm-hmm.
think our approach on getting to the market and getting to where the owner operators are has really helped us succeed and excel, because
Mhm.
those traditional ways aren't going to work for this subset. In the larger side of the market, the Graystars of the world, all of these guys, that side of the market for utility billing is pretty saturated. Maybe an 80% saturation, but there's really only like a 20% saturation in the lower end of the market. And you start
Mhm.
to see these people like, how do we kind of come down market? It's a much easier for me to go up market than it is for these giants to come down market. So I think that we still have a lot of runway. I think we still have a ton of growth in front of us. We've grown tremendously over the last year and a half. I think what is going to continue to come up is you have to compete with these guys, right? So getting the funding, we just opened up a $2 million seed round. We actually have just been bootstrapping it since our first round. We had raised about $350,000 in 2022. And now we're going out for a $2 million seed round to really help propel the growth, propel our integrations, and really help drive our growth in the market. And, being a, single founder and, with great partners and great investors in the company, we can get out there in front of people, but, it's getting enough funding in amount of time that we need to kind of continue our growth cycle. So I think that's a struggle from all founders, is getting enough capital to stay capitalized.
Mhm.
We're just at the point of break even right now, but we really need to expand our growth cycle even more.
Hmm. Yeah, and it sounds like the funding will be used to continue to enhance the technology, the integration, so you can work with bigger software like in the ecosystem, and then
Mhm.
also just to get your messaging out and acquire more customers. Is
Yep,
that a fair statement?
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
And I would also say congratulations on getting to even break even. I think that that's an accomplishment of in and of itself. I know that, you want to grow fast, but at the same time, getting even to break even is a great accomplishment for startups. So, and it sounds like you have a really great product and that people need it. So I think you're well on your way to continue to have that growth continue through the rest of the 2020s. So Tiffany, tell me what's next. So what's kind of the vision here for the company going forward? Where do you guys want to be in 2030 with Utility Ranger?
Well, 2030 is quite a bit out from now. So,
Sure. 2026
there.
then. How about that? Next year.
We have big plans for the company. We're going to continue to grow our product offering. This segment of the market, I think, is just so underserved, and it really just triggers my heart. I just feel like there's so many of my clients who said, just listening to your story, you are me, you understand me. Like, no one else is really serving this side of the market and giving them what they need to be successful. So I just get so much joy and fulfillment by giving them the answers and by giving them guidance on how to really grow their portfolio, what kind of NOI hacking, mechanisms that they can use to really help launch and grow their business. I really enjoy that personally. Of course, we're going to move up market slightly. I don't want to get up into the same market that everybody else is playing in, because that market's already really saturated. I do think we'll
Mhm.
have some clients who are using this as a means to vertically integrate in the larger portfolio sizes, but that's probably more of an enterprise version of the software that we will eventually have as well.
Mhm.
But really, my focus is on helping this subset of the market, growing them, and growing our tool set that's going to just help benefit them even more. That is really a passion of mine, and something that really is serving to people like me and people who just want to grow their multifamily portfolio. We're definitely some brand expansions that we're looking into. We definitely have a lot of amazing partners to date. We're trying to partner with people who are targeting the same segment of the market to really kind of collaborate together, because we don't go about things in traditional ways, because this subset of the market doesn't follow those traditional paths. And so we want
Mhm.
to align ourselves with people who are serving the market like we are. So there's a lot of growth to be had, and 2030 is a way out. So ways out. So there's a lot that can happen before then.
Sure.
And we're just going to focus on growing and scaling the company.
Sure. Have you had a chance to meet with the Bigger Pockets team yet?
I have. I was on one of their podcasts, And then the investor group, which is affiliated with them, I spoke at their conference. I'm doing a lot of conferences that are, people just like the investor group and these kind of smaller real estate coaches.
Sure. Okay. Awesome. Well, yeah, they're your perfect avatar, I feel. So yeah, that's great.
Yeah,
So
totally.
You're already ahead of the game. You're everywhere all the time. So I love that. So Tiffany, it's been a pleasure to have you on here. I thank you so much for your time and for sharing some great insights and knowledge within the real estate and the PropTech space. If listeners wanted to get in touch or find out more about you or your companies, what would be the best way for them to do that?
They can find me on utilityranger.com. They can also find me on all the social media handles, either under Utility Ranger, or they can find me under Tiffany Mittal, which is Mittal.
Awesome. Well, great. Well, we'll make sure to put all that stuff in the show notes for folks that are driving or something where they can't write that down. So great. Thanks for tuning into this episode of Deal Flow. Don't forget to give this podcast a follow on Apple Music and Spotify, and subscribe on YouTube so you don't miss an episode. And of course, if you feel someone else would get something out of this show, please go ahead and send it across to them. Feel free to comment below with regards to future guests you'd like to see in the show, or get in touch should you think that your knowledge and expertise would make for a great episode. Thanks again from me, and I'll see you next time on Deal Flow. Thank you for listening to Deal Flow with me, Michael Poulio. We hope you gained valuable insights into private equity real estate and market trends. Stay tuned for more expert discussions and updates on the latest in commercial real estate and structured finance. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review on your favorite podcasting platform. Join us next time for more high-level conversations that empower your investment decisions and your operating results.